So, hello there. Welcome to everybody who's joined so far. It's not quite 2 o'clock yet, so we'll begin just shortly, just waiting for a few more people to arrive. I see them coming through now. If you would be so kind, we'll have an opportunity to speak and say hello to each other, but in the meantime, would you be so kind just to pop yourselves onto mute, just to help filter out some of that background noise. Thank you very much. Okay, and just to check in that before we begin, that everyone can see and hear me okay.
Yes.
That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Great. Okay, so let's begin. My name is Tricia Wilkie. For those of you who don't know me, my company is the Mind Hub. I'm the founder of the Mind Hub, and I want to welcome you all to this session today, my Introduction to Mental Wellbeing in the Workplace webinar. So what do we do at the Mind Hub? So myself and people that I collaborate with deliver mindful-based interventions and mental health awareness to individuals and in the workplace. I teach a very evidence-based scientific form of modern mindfulness, if you like, called mindful-based cognitive therapy. And I'm also instructor member for Mental Health First Aid England, teaching their full suite of adult mental health awareness products. So why do I do this? Just a little bit about my why before we begin. So I've experienced some really high anxiety in the past. I've experienced panic disorder. And I also returned back to work after maternity leave, actually in quite a poor mental state. I returned back to work quite in the depths of postnatal depression, which was quite a scary place to be at that time. And returning back to work when you're not feeling well like that, it can be, you know, very difficult to deal with, quite overwhelming. And this was 13 years ago. And you know, even though at the time then, I'm sure I worked for a wonderful company, my colleagues were very lovely, and I'm sure it would have been really empathetic had I reached out to them. But you know, when you're not feeling in a great place, when you're not mentally in the best place that you can be, you don't really think clearly or rationally to kind of understand that. And the whole stigma and discrimination around mental health, particularly back, you know, in that time, was quite prevalent. And so that was very inhibitive, you know, stopped me from reaching out for help. And it was a really tough time. Actually, I ended up leaving the organisation. So that's really my why, because I'm quite passionate now about raising awareness of mental health, decreasing the stigma and discrimination, so that because we all have mental health, so that everybody feels more able to reach out for help, and we as individuals feel more confident to support others too. And also because of the skills that I learned through mindful-based cognitive therapy that helped me really overcome my anxiety and lose the fear of that fear. And now, you know, I feel a little bit of anxiety now as I'm sitting here, because it's, you know, doing this webinar in front of you, but that's perfectly normal. It's normal for us to feel anxiety. But now I have the tools and the skills to really help me, you know, really overcome and not having to live with that anxiety disorder anymore. So that's my why. And so really passionate about supporting individuals and organisations to, you know, really empower them, give them the skills and the tools to drive awareness and take accountability for mental health. So I'll run through the agenda in a moment, but just a little bit of housekeeping. If you're able to, please just pop yourselves onto mute, so just to filter out some of that distraction. There will absolutely be time for Q&As. Maybe just store all those lovely questions for me, and maybe we can go through those Q&As at the end. There's quite a lot of information to go through. I always like to really pack in lots of information into my workshops. We will be doing some interactive activities, and for this I use software called menti.com. And for that you just need to grab a smart device, whether that be a phone or a tablet, and then I'll give you further instructions for that when we arrive at that point. But know that you don't have to set up an account or password or anything like that. It's very easy to use, and it's completely anonymous and confidential, so we're not collecting any data here. One important point I wanted to make was that we are talking about mental health. I will be mentioning the word suicide, and we will be talking a little bit about that. And so I just wanted to give you a bit of that trigger warning, and know that if any time that you wish to step out of this webinar, then please do. But if you do that, please do check in with me after, so that we can just have a quick chat about that. Okay, but nothing too heavy, but obviously always like to give that trigger warning whenever we're talking about mental health. And also just to let you know, this session is being recorded, so after the session you'll receive a copy of this, and feel free to watch that again or pass it on to your colleagues. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to our first interactive activity. Say that with confidence. Here we go, we're on the slide. So if you wouldn't mind now just grabbing your smart device and just contemplating on this question: does your organisation have a strategy in place to support your mental health? The answers are yes, no, and don't know. So you'll see at the top of the screen here, there is the web address for menti.com, and there is a code here. So all you need to do is just to head to that website on your smart device and just punch in that 7-digit code. And on your smart device, you'll have this slide on your screen, and you can then select your answer. So I can see the answer starting to come in now. Okay, so at the moment we've got a very nice even split between yes, no, and don't know. Okay, good now to see that the balance is more in favour of yes, which is great news. Okay, really encouraging that you know, we have someone. The majority of people, majority of organisations do have that plan in place, which is great. A couple of people are unsure, yeah, don't know, and you know, this often happens. Perhaps there is a strategy in place, but perhaps it's not very well communicated, and people are unsure, they don't know how to access that. And fortunately, at the moment, we only have one person who says no, that they don't have that in place. Great, so that just gives an idea, just to kind of gauge from people online today, you know, what strategy is in place. So I'm really pleased, positive, that the majority of people do. That's fantastic. Okay, so for today we're going to be covering, you know, what is mental health? What does good mental health look like? What does poor mental health look like? And, you know, what does that mean for everybody in between? And looking at mental health as a continuum. Then we're going to be looking more in detail about mental well-being in the workplace. What does that look like? What does that mean? And how mindful-based approaches and mental health awareness can help really support some of those lovely strategies that are in place to, you know, improve cultures, create happy, healthy working environments, so that people feel more motivated and in a much better place to perform. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So what is mental health? What does mental health mean to you? What does it look like to be mentally healthy? And how do you know when perhaps your mental health is not doing so well? There's many definitions for mental health. I particularly like this one from the World Health Organization. That mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realises his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. And I really love this statement, and I really truly believe that everybody has a right to feel like feels this way, and to realise that potential. And sadly, some people who experience poor mental health don't get to realise that potential for many different reasons. You know, and largely it is around due to stigma and discrimination. You know, preventing people from realising lots of these things. Not having access to the right support, not feeling like they want to go and access that support in fear of what people might think of them. All of these things holding them back and preventing their recovery. But good mental health, when we have good mental well-being, good mental fitness, the mind can think clearly. We're much more able to think in a much more rational way. We can make judgments based on evidence rather than just emotive judgments. We're able to see other people's points of view. We'll be able to see the grey areas and not just with this tunnel vision. The opposite of that, when we're having poor mental health, when the brain becomes stressed, it's not able to function in quite the same way. It doesn't have that space for that processing to think really clearly and rationally. And in stark contrast to the mind in a good mental state, it may think very irrationally, be very illogical, may only be able to see in black and white and not the grey areas and not from another perspective. It might be much more catastrophic and paranoid in its thinking. And so when we're in this particular state, we become less resilient to the challenges of life. And so this exacerbates the problems and symptoms of mental ill health. And you can probably, if you think about your own mental health, you might think, well, actually, sometimes, you know, I'm feeling good and I'm on fire and I'm on the ball. And actually, I can relate to times when actually I'm in a state of all those things that I've described, perhaps, you know, not being able to think rationally and being a little bit more illogical and more catastrophic. And, you know, I'm sure for many of us have actually felt like we've been swinging between these two states, particularly in these last few months whilst we've been going through this pandemic, which has obviously placed a lot of stress onto people. And just by reflecting on that, we can see that there's not just a state of being mentally unwell and mentally well, that there is somewhere in the middle, and that actually we do slide between these states. You know, there is no health without mental health, and we are all on a continuum. So just to explain this a little bit further, I've got a mental health continuum here. Mental health used to be viewed at one point on a very linear scale. So you have poor mental health at one end, positive mental health at the other. But this linear scale didn't really accommodate people who perhaps had, you know, a very serious diagnosable mental health condition, but because of the right support and treatment that they were on, actually are living and functioning, with really good mental fitness. And then similarly, you have someone who doesn't have a diagnosis of any mental health condition, but actually they're experiencing poor mental health. So this continuum is more reflective of how things really are and accommodates people, you know, living very well with diagnosable illnesses. So here on our vertical axis, this represents at the top, we have very positive mental wellness, and at the bottom, very poor mental wellness, poor mental health. And on our horizontal axis, on the left, we have someone who would have a severe diagnosis, and then on the right, someone with no diagnosis. And so in the upper right-hand quadrant, we have someone here who is mentally well and doesn't have a diagnosis. And we have that in person up here. So say that this person, this was in February of this year. This person was feeling well, looking forward to the year ahead, feeling you know, energized for the year to come. And then, of course, come March, we go into lockdown. Okay, so this person now, whereby was feeling very motivated and knew where they were going, knew what was coming. Now work has changed, may have been put onto furlough, or maybe now having to work from home and adapt to working from home. Add into that perhaps homeschooling. I think I'm describing myself here. Lots of other pressures and strains upon this person. And this person then may start to feel some stress and anxiety around that situation they're in. So now they've dropped down into this lower right-hand quadrant. They don't have a diagnosis of mental ill health, but their mental health is suffering right now. Now, I would suggest that most people would go between these two right-hand quadrants. You know, I know for myself, go through periods of anxiety, perhaps low mood, they're my triggers where I know I need to help myself. And so that, you know, by putting those steps in place, I then move back up to that top right-hand quadrant. But say if this person does not seek help, does not reach out to seek help, this stress, anxiety, if left unchecked, could lead to something more serious, such as depression. Now, it takes probably people around a year to go get a diagnosis. Depression is categorised into low, moderate and severe based on a diagnostic tool of 10 symptoms. And usually a person has to have a persistent low mood and some of these other symptoms for at least 2 weeks. But actually, sadly, a lot of people wait around a year before going to seek help. And I know that actually that was certainly in my case. I was actually in quite a poor place. So this person may pop along to their GP, get a diagnosis of depression. But just because you get a diagnosis doesn't mean then that you're going to become well. There's lots of other factors that have to happen. You have to have the right support. You have to have the right treatment, the right therapy, whatever that may be. It may just be talking therapies, you know, getting support from your family and friends. It's not always just about taking a pill. There's lots of other factors. Feeling supported at work, in your community, having meaning and purpose, lots of different things. Eating well, sleeping well, getting enough exercise, all these kind of things to promote good recovery. If that person has all of those things in place, then they may find themselves back up in this upper left-hand quadrant. Yes, they've got a diagnosis, but are actually coping well. And then it's very possible to move back into this top right-hand quadrant. Now, someone who has a really serious diagnosis, such as schizophrenia or bipolar, you know, may not move 100% back into this right-hand quadrant, but, you know, they might get that sort of 80 to 90% of themselves. But it is possible with those right supports in place to have absolute, you know, great mental fitness. But there's one thing that prevents, or probably actually pushes people down into that bottom right-hand quadrant and then prevents people from moving around this continuum, and that is stigma. Which, you know, things are moving in the right direction, but still there is huge stigma and discrimination, not just in the workplace, but in the wider community. And this really, you know, someone may self-stigmatize, you know, why am I feeling like this? I'm so weak, I'm this, that, and the other, and oh God, I'm nuts, you know, and just really self-stigmatize themselves, which makes their mental health much worse. They then may not want to go seek help because they're worried about what this might mean. You know, what if work finds out? Will I have a job to go back to? Or they think that I'll never cope again. You know, for me, if I go and say that I'm depressed and having the feelings that I'm feeling, that someone's going to take my baby away from me, you know, will my friends still want to talk to me? All of these, you know, thoughts that come into your head, and that stigma and discrimination as well may prevent someone from making that really great full recovery that you know is out there for them, because they might not want to access the services and don't want to reach out to get the support that they need. So just to be aware of yourself, where you are on this continuum, where maybe some of your team members, your colleagues, you know, we will all be moving around this continuum, and that it's not just a case of being mentally unwell or mentally well, that we will fluctuate, and at some point in our lifetime we will experience poor mental health. And sometimes for me, you know, when life's really crazy, I think this doesn't change just perhaps week by week. It can happen moment by moment in the day. You know, you're one way in the morning, and by the afternoon you've probably dropped down into the bottom right hand quadrant, and hopefully back by the evening you're back up there. But it's just a continual process. There's no stigma, there's no health without mental health. It's not just about physical health, it's mental health as well. The mental and physical are intrinsically linked. And you know, people who experience long-term physical illness are more at risk of developing mental illness, and people who experience long-term mental illness are also at risk of developing physical illnesses too. So you know, we've got to stop seeing mental health as you know, being quite separate from physical health. It is really just one, and we'll come on to more about that, the disparity and the balance of that in just a moment. Okay, so moving on to well-being in the workplace. Some of your colleagues here who are from HR function and health and safety may well be aware of this report. This is a fantastic report. It was commissioned by the government in 2017 to investigate into mental well-being in the workplace, because mental health is on the rise. It's very costly to business and to society, and it's clear that people were at work struggling to survive with mental health, not thriving in the workplace. So this independent report was commissioned, the Stevenson Farmer Review, and they came up with 6 mental health core standards, which can be used as a really great framework to build mental health strategy around. And so within these core standards, it's about having a really well thought out mental well-being strategy in place, but not just having that in place, but you know, making sure that it's really, really well implemented and communicated as well. So often people don't know that something like this is actually in place at work, and we've seen a couple of people today who've also said that. It's about developing mental health awareness among employees, investing time in training and ongoing commitment to that, encouraging those open conversations, creating a safe space, an open, empathetic, safe space where these conversations can happen without judgment, and that there's great support in place for signposting. Obviously providing good working conditions, ensuring people have this healthy work-life balance and opportunities for development, and effective people management through line managers, and obviously routinely monitoring. This is something else that doesn't often happen, is mental health plans, strategies get put in place, a bit of training is done, but none of it's ever really measured to see how that's really working. And I truly believe that this is something that could quite, perhaps not easily, but why can that not be done? There's a direct link between wellness, the culture and performance, so the correlation between those, being able to measure that, I think, is a wonderful thing. So if you don't have anything in place, or you have, you're thinking about putting a strategy together, then I really recommend, if you haven't read this report, is to just go on the gov.uk website, or just Google Thriving at Work, the Stevenson Farmer Review, and that will pop up for you. It's a great framework to work within. So why do we need this? Well, there is a huge disparity between physical and mental health first aid. As I said, there's no such thing as just mental health or just physical health. It's all health. It's actually mandatory for workplaces over a certain number of employees to have physical first aiders in place. As yet, it's not mandatory for mental health first aiders, but I say as yet because this is being discussed within Parliament, and on the Health and Safety Executive website, they actually do recommend that even though it's not mandatory, that organisations have the same amount of mental health first aiders in place as they do physical first aiders. And see, the problem is we're so okay, aren't we, with talking about physical illnesses, and sometimes we even enjoy talking about it, but we don't do that with mental health. We don't have a problem in calling up and saying, oh, I've sprained my ankle, or I've got this horrific cold, or I've got this chest infection, and I'm going to have some time off work. We don't seem to have a problem with that. But I don't ever recall everyone calling in to me when I was in the workplace saying, oh, I'm just really struggling with my anxiety at the moment, or I'm just so stressed out at the moment. I just need even a half a day just to kind of gather my head together, let alone saying I need a week off. That just doesn't happen, and I think it's because mental health is an unseen quantity, because it's not visible. You can't prove it. People feel unable to come forward, and obviously all the stigma and discrimination. People don't want to call into work because they're worried about what their colleagues or their bosses will think about them, if they call up and say that they need some time off for mental health. But the brain, is an organ in the body, just like any other, that is prone to injury and illness. And, we will all experience different physical ailments throughout our lifetime. And we will also have to deal with some mental ailments from time to time as well. And really, we've got to get this shift in place, that really it's just the same. Mental health is just the same as physical, and the more that we can smash those barriers of stigma, get rid of that, get rid of the discrimination, the more people will come forward. So just some stats to support actually what I'm saying, that mental health is just as important as physical health. So this is quite a punchy stat. It really blew me away when I first read this stat, that 20% of the population will have thoughts of suicide in their lifetime. 20%, 1 in 5, and that you're more likely to meet someone who's having thoughts of suicide than someone who's having a heart attack. And you think about that, and I think, I haven't done any first aid training for quite some time, but I still remember ABC and CPR, and would have a vague idea of, how to help someone if I had to. But until I did my mental health first aid instructor training, would I have felt confident to have a conversation with someone who was very depressed and ask them, quite directly, were they having thoughts of suicide? And if they said yes, how would I support them? No, never. Barely the word even suicide, talking about suicide just seems so taboo. Or it did, it's not now. It's really good to talk about suicide because thoughts are actually very common. Fortunately, far fewer people do go on to attempt their own lives, and far fewer than that actually go on to die by suicide. But if I told you that around 6,500 people die every year by suicide, in comparison to 1,700 from road traffic accidents, that's a lot of preventable deaths. We can't save everybody, but maybe just having a conversation, might save one person, and that one life is worth saving. We've all heard the stat or seen the stat, 1 in 4 people experience mental ill health every year. 1 in 6 working age adults at any given time will have a diagnosable mental health condition such as depression and anxiety. And 95% of people who are off sick with stress will give a different reason, as I've mentioned before. So that stigma and discrimination, I think that's a real shame. There's a real missed opportunity there. If you have a team member calling in sick with stress, there's an opportunity there to find out, what's going on. Is it a workplace stress? Is it something that, the organisation needs to be alerted to? Which might open up a can of worms, and you realise actually there's a problem within that team or for that individual. Just a little bit of extra support, some adjustments might be made so that person can feel really supported, feel less stressed, and actually work much more happier and productively. Sadly, this stat was released in August by the Office of National Statistics. It's unsurprising, but depression rates have doubled since the pandemic, which then sends a real warning signal to me that this 1 in 6 stat and the 1 in 5 for suicidal thoughts is probably much higher, because people who are living with depression, obviously depression may lead to suicidal thoughts and risk of life. So if there are double the amount of people experiencing depression right now, I would say that there will be more people who are having perhaps quite hopeless thoughts about their future, which is really sad. And as people start now to transition back into the workplace, I'm quite worried that it will be quite an unhealthy place. And there is, of course, a cost. You know, I don't like talking about the cost, perhaps mental health is not really where I'm at, but when we're talking to businesses, you know, there is a real cost of mental health, around 45 billion. And actually the total social and economic cost to the UK is 105 billion. Now, I know from my HR friends, fortunately, I've got quite a few HR friends around, and the current theme is that well-being typically has always been quite low down on boardroom agendas. But, you know, I think when you look at that cost, that's a huge cost. Surely well-being should be a boardroom issue, absolutely. It should be a measurable KPI. You know, there must be a direct correlation between poor mental health and poor performance, which will ultimately affect their profits. And Deloitte actually recently published a well thought out well-being strategy that included things such as mindful based interventions, mental health first aiders could see a return of their investment of 5 to 1, and actually even higher in some cases. So, you know, I think that sets a really good business case for, you know, getting a good strategy in place. Some positive stats for you around mental health first aiders. So this was an independent study that was carried out across multiple industries and organisations about the impact of mental health first aiders have on the workplace. You know, are they a good thing? Is it just another fad? Do they actually bring about a change? Well, the people that I've trained and keep in contact with, I believe so, yes. And this stat gives us some really encouraging stats. Thinking back to those core standards in that Stevenson Pharma review around increasing understanding and conversations around mental health, 91% said that there had been an increased understanding, and 87% said that more conversations were happening at work. And actually, I really like this stat as well, the last stat. 83% noticed an improvement in procedures for signposting to further support. And actually, on the MHFA England website, there's some great video testimonials from companies, Siemens being one of them, saying that what they've noticed is that engagement of their EAP system has, you know, quite significantly increased. Because again, a lot of workplaces have some fantastic EAP services in place, which are great for responding quite reactively to mental health, but they're often quite criminally underused. So mental health first aiders really help to drive awareness of those two. So just wanted to leave you some more positive stats there. Okay, let's have another little bit of interactivity. If you wouldn't mind just heading back to your smart device and heading back to menti.com, you should automatically find that this poll is now sitting on your device. I'd just like you to think about these 4 questions and think about how much you either disagree or agree with some of these statements. So if you strongly disagree, you could put in 0. If you strongly agreed, you could select 10. If you're feeling quite neutral about that, then you would be selecting 5. But just thinking about your mental well-being, you know, is your mental well-being at work being supported? Do you know how to access your mental health support at work? And you feel safe to reach out for mental health support, and that you feel confident in supporting colleagues experiencing poor mental health? Great, so the answers are coming in here, and I'm really pleased to see that we are erring on the positive, which is great. And that is great to see, because times are changing. You know, we hear a lot about mental health organisations that are starting to get on board and really implement this, which is really music to my ears. So that's fantastic. Ooh, we've still got a couple more coming in here. Great. One that I'm really, although I think maybe we've only had one person, maybe not everybody has answered all of these questions here. So we've got a couple of people who don't feel that their mental well-being is being supported at work. They were probably the people who didn't, who knew that there wasn't anything in place at work. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so this tells us that overall it's looking quite positive, but as always, and like anything, there's always a little bit more work that needs to be done. And I think actually that's a really good point. These things should always be ongoing, an ongoing commitment to wellness. I say wellness because this session is about mental health, but obviously well-being, there's many pillars to well-being. It's not just mental health, it's physical health, it's financial health, it's that social and community connected health as well. Fantastic. Okay, so how can mindful-based interventions and mental health awareness training really help to, you know, support these fantastic strategies that are in place, and help to kind of change culture within the organisation? So really, it's about, you know, investing again. Another one of those core standards of that Stevenson Pharma review was about development, self-development. So providing individuals with really important life skills, not just for the workplace, but outside of work too, to help them manage their stress and anxiety in a much more skillful way, and just to have better awareness of self, and to be able to take, I guess, more accountability as well. You know, it's not the workplace's responsibility for an individual's health, but, you know, there is a, you know, need to recognise that actually the stresses and strain that come from work may have an impact, trigger or worsen existing mental health conditions. And these life skills, I say, are brilliant for in the workplace, outside of the workplace. And we know that if people can manage their social life, their home life, their family life in a much better way, that will impact them at work. And also, if they're functioning really well at work, that will also impact their family life too. So it's great to have these good foundational life skills in place. So mindfulness is often thought of maybe being a bit woo-woo, but mindful-based cognitive therapy is a very modern, evidence-based form of mindfulness. It does have its roots in those brilliant ancient traditions. So all the wisdom has been taken from those and put in a very secular training developed by neuroscientists to help people really bring about changes in the brain, to become more aware of themselves, to develop higher metacognitive skills, self-regulation skills, which simply means just being able to think more clearly about their thinking, and to recognize emotion but not be driven by them. This ultimately leads to greater emotional and mental resilience, being able to recognize and manage the stress and anxiety much more skillfully, which then might help prevent that stress and anxiety from leading on to much more serious conditions, and also just that can, you know, meet the challenges of life and work with much more equanimity, much more calmness. And also, this is great for in the workplace. The more mindful people are, we develop much more empathy, compassion for others, much more able to take a step back and see it from another person's point of view, which in the workplace is incredibly useful and helps to, you know, create happier, healthy, more cohesive teams. And with the mental health training, again, it all starts with greater awareness. A lot of people are just really unaware about what is mental health, what is my mental health? Why do I have to be accountable for my own mental health? What does it mean for me? Not having an understanding perhaps of someone else who might be experiencing mental health, not recognizing in themselves that actually they're not in a great place. So this mental health awareness gives that awareness to people and the skills to recognize what is going on with them and help themselves, give them confidence and empower them to reach out and take ownership, actually, to get the help that they need, be more accountable for themselves. Through this accountability and taking better care of well-being, see much less absenteeism, presenteeism, which will lead to also, increased wellness, motivation and productivity. When the brain is stressed, motivation will go down, and with it so will go performance. When we're feeling well, or we're feeling at least that we are in control of our wellness, and at least we're making good strides to better wellness, then we feel much more energized, motivated, and in a much better place to perform. So how the Mind Hub can help you with regards to mindfulness. So I've been very busy during this pandemic and before, but online, literally delivering these workshops, delivering this wellbeing program. So aside to actually teaching the formal 8-session mindful-based cognitive therapy course, have designed here a wellbeing program of 10 workshops, ranging from an introduction to this scientific mindfulness, through to how we're managing change going through this pandemic, to mindful leadership, recognizing and managing our stress. Lots of different workshops which can be booked as a whole program, or they also work fantastically well just as standalone products. So if this is something that you think might be of interest to support your team, something that you can do to embed within your wellness strategy, then feel free to get in touch and we can discuss that in more detail. With the mental health awareness, I can deliver, as I say, the full suite of the adult mental health awareness training, which you might like to just book the training on its own, or send some people to an external course, or I can help you to really embed this mental health awareness piece and training into your strategy, perhaps starting with a half-day awareness training, which is suitable for all your employees. That's great training to kickstart your mental health campaign. And then we can work to more promotion of mental health first aid. Not everybody is suitable to become a mental health first aider. And so it's good to really think about that recruitment process and the diversity of people you have, and cross functions in your organisation. So through that recruitment and delivery of the training, and then just as in physical first aid, it's recommended that refresher training for those first aiders is carried out every 3 years. So this training, it all moved obviously to online during when we went into lockdown. Can now deliver face-to-face if the workspace is suitable and can accommodate safe social distance face-to-face learning, or it can be carried out online. If you have just a couple of colleagues, you can send them on to an external course. My next course starts on the 29th of September. And then it's split over 4 manageable, because we don't want to spend 2 whole days online. No one wants to do that. So it's split over 4 2-hour live sessions on the 29th of September, the 1st, 6th and 8th of October in the morning. If you have more than 2 people, 2 or more delegates that you'd like to send onto the course, then as a little incentive for doing that, I'd be delighted to come and run a free half-hour mindfulness drop-in session for you online to your workplace. If you have a number of people that you would like to train up, then get in touch and I can deliver that just to your organisation. But just so you know, there's the options to do either. Okay, so I think that's just about it from me. Just leaving you with this little note. Obviously, prevention is so much better than just working really reactively to mental health, whether it's physical or mental health. Early intervention is vital to promote a great recovery. And it's great to have reactive services in place, but as always, the more proactive that we can be, and really empowering people to, from the very beginning, to be more mindful of their wellness and have skills in place to help themselves, then hopefully we can prevent poor mental health, and from existing poor mental health to worsen into something much more serious. Okay, thank you for listening to me. Now I hand over to you. Do you have any questions for me? I will come off share so that I can see if there are any questions into the...
Tricia, it's Michelle here. Hi Tricia, thanks a lot for the session. It was really helpful, and you've got such a lovely calm voice, which is great. I just wondered if you had any thoughts or advice. I find it particularly challenging to get senior leaders involved in helping to promote mental well-being in the workplace, and encouraging people to focus on this area of well-being. I guess that's a reflection of needing to continue to evolve our culture of making it a safe space, but getting leaders to show their vulnerability more in order to encourage more junior colleagues. Is there any tips, thoughts that you have that may help some of us as employers on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So just one question for you, just to make me to think about that a little bit more, is, do you get a consistent feedback from line managers? What is the resistance?
I'd say it isn't a resistance, and more they're not used to sharing, that kind of personal side of themselves. And potentially worried about what people might think of them. Will they be looked at differently, thought of differently, about showing that kind of vulnerable side, perhaps. So I think it's a fear that's not necessarily steeped in rational or kind of any evidence, but it's helping them to kind of overcome that.
Yeah, so again, it all comes back, doesn't it? To stigma and discrimination, and worrying about, here I am a leader, will they think I'm weak if I share some vulnerability? It just shows that, we're all kind of the same. We all feel quite vulnerable, and actually this is really, really normal. And so what I find is that something like just some basic awareness training for the whole organisation, or at least starting off with line managers, so that they have, because a lot of it comes from a lack of understanding, that fear, that lack of understanding. So providing that training to have a better understanding of mental health in general, that we're all vulnerable, we're all susceptible to it. There will be people in your team who will be experiencing poor mental health at the moment, and that actually that it's okay, that this is normal, but we just need to have those conversations. So I find that really helps to instill a little bit of confidence, and perhaps more motivation once that understanding is there. So I'm hearing that was one side, and something else I'm hearing, you're thinking very specifically of wanting leaders to show themselves and to be a little bit more vulnerable. Obviously this is something that you can't force people to do, but actually by creating lots of other things within the organisation, having these time to talk opportunities, creating more conversations, actively promoting that, engaging that, you start to foster a much more open culture. So that will also help perhaps those leaders say, oh, well actually so and so shared that, and it was okay, and just help instill some of that confidence too. There's a great if you go on to, there's a website, it's Minds at Work. I can't remember the exact address of that, but I think it's the Minds at Work movement. If you go onto their website, they've got some fantastic videos. They've got some leaders from 3, Price Waterhouse Coopers, some really big organisations talking about themselves. They've had, might be living with bipolar, they've had burnout, postnatal depression, all sorts of things, but how, actually it's made them better leaders because they're much more compassionate and empathetic to what other people might be going through. It's a real strength actually to have people in the workplace who have experienced this. So that might be quite nice, just a little resource to go to, just to see maybe they've done it. And if you had just one person in your organisation that was happy, even I don't know, what you've experienced, but even just sharing a little something of yourself. It doesn't have to be in detail, but just championing. Say, wow, Michelle did that. So that means we're okay, that we can talk about this. It's such a powerful message. If you can do it, amazing.
Yeah, super. Thanks so much, Tricia.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. Okay, does anyone else have a question for me? I'm just trying to get to my Q&A here to see if anyone has. Okay, I'm having a technophobe moment. Does anyone have a question? If you put something into the chat, just while I'm trying to find my chat box, feel free just to come off mute and ask me any questions. Oh, it's because I'm on still share. There you go. Okay, I can't see any other questions in that chat box for now. If you think of something comes to mind that you wish that you'd asked, then feel free just to get in contact with me at tricia@themindhub.co.uk, and I will answer those for you. Please feel free to get in touch if you any questions about mental health, how to support someone. If you're feeling triggered, if there's something happening now that you need help with, please get in touch with me. I'll always be here to take your call. Feel free to visit my website, www.themindhub.co.uk. And I'm always here, always happy to chat. I'd love to keep in touch with you all. If you'd rather I didn't do that, just let me know, and I'll make sure that doesn't happen. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining today, and I hope to speak with some of you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.